The world is already reeling under the effects of climate change. Let's each of us do our bit while there is still hope. A warm and cloudy morning in the Sangla Valley of Kinnor. Although it is already November when winter is supposed to set in, Tara comes out of her room in the Grand Shangri-La Hotel, which belongs to Yontan Mama, and finds Polly missing.
Polly, where are you? Charu Chachi, where has Polly gone off to?
I too have been looking for him. I wonder what he is up to.
Polly is cooling himself in the little pond in my water garden. He keeps diving in and then coming out and shaking off the water from his wet feathers.
This is freak weather. I wonder why it is so warm. November is normally winter season.
This is not freak weather, Tara. This is the result of climate change. The entire globe is becoming hotter. Here comes Polly. He has come to listen to our conversation.
Hey Polly, you understand all that Charu Chachi tells us every day, don't you?
Polly is the most well-informed bird in the world. He knows all about the environment. He should be called Dr. Polly, the environmentalist.
It is quite cloudy too. Do the clouds also have anything to do with it being warmer today?
Yes, Tara. About 20% of the sun's heat is scattered and reflected back by clouds. But at the same time, another 20% of the sun's heat is absorbed by the clouds, thus retaining the heat around us.
Charu Chachi, Yontan Mama, Polly and I are eagerly waiting your environment-related stories for today. Although we have discussed climate change earlier too when I was in the 8th grade. Can we delve deeper into the subject since it's a subject that all of us need to know much about?
Yes, I agree with Tara. I too need to know more about climate change so that I can do my bit at the hotel and in my everyday life activities towards warding it off.
Well, to begin with, we were talking about the amount of sun's energy that gets absorbed by the earth and the amount that gets reflected. Earth's movement is powered almost entirely by solar energy. All solar radiation entering Earth's atmosphere must be returned to space to maintain the global average temperature.
So, it is important that there is a balance of this energy between the amount we receive and the amount that is reflected back, isn't it?
Bilkul, you hit the nail on the head. That is exactly what climate change is all about.
We need to ensure that the solar energy received by us does not remain trapped over the planet like a blanket formed by the greenhouse gases, na?
Consider your ma working at the stove, for example. When cooking, the stove burner is lit to heat the food. Now, imagine the burner to be the earth and the lit up gas to be the sun. After cooking, she turns off the stove. Does the burner cool down immediately?
Nahi! Even when the gas is switched off, the burner remains hot for quite some time. मैं समझ गई. At the end of the day, the sun setting can be compared to the burner being switched off. Even though there is no additional heat, the burner continues to remain hot for quite some time. Just like the ground on earth continues to remain hot as it is giving off heat in a different form.
Shabash! This different form of heat is called infrared radiation. And it is this infrared radiation formed by Earth absorbing the sun's heat during day that we are preventing from going back into space by emitting clouds of greenhouse gases during our daily activities. Greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and even water vapor.
Yo, what a complicated phenomenon explained by you Chachi ji and Tara in such a simple way. Did you understand it all, Polly?
But Charu Chachi, the sun being directly over the tropics heats up the land, water, and air in this region. But what about the polar regions, which receive very little sunlight? For some months in winter, I have learned in school, there is continuous darkness. They don't see the sun at all.
Good point. You are right. But all of nature on our planet is interconnected. Just like through technology, we are nowadays all connected by the World Wide Web. The winds and ocean currents that are constantly moving carry the heat to the polar regions.
If only 150 years ago our forefathers had realized the natural repercussions of burning fossil fuels and exploiting our natural resources, we would not have landed this mess of climate crisis. But what has been done. We now have to take action on a war footing.
Wah, Tara, you speak like a great leader.
So many of the effects of climate change, which we could never have thought of, are coming to light now as time progresses.
Jaise?
Right from the ocean floor to the highest mountains, the repercussions are being felt. The environment as well as society at large are being affected. It is becoming difficult to grow good food or even provide adequate clean drinking water.
I have observed here in the Himalayas that many species like the snow leopards, ibex and bharals are now moving to still higher elevations, probably because they find their usual territories warmer. And certain ground-hugging plants have begun to grow on the tops of the mountain peaks where nothing would grow earlier.
Everything seems to have gone topsy-turvy. Last year, I had learned that climate change even affects the timing of hibernation, migration and flowering among wildlife.
What's more, the cold-loving animals like the polar bears and Arctic fox, as well as cold water-loving plants like the kelp forests, are facing certain extinction as the temperatures keep rising.
That is very sad. The entire world should get together and resolve to do their best to stop temperatures from rising.
You are right. But there are certain situations which have gone out of our control.
Jaise, which situations?
Like, for instance, in the Arctic, the permafrost. The soil, which had remained frozen for millions of years, has now begun melting. Some partially decomposed animals and plants that had got buried under it eons ago are now being exposed. And the methane gas that had formed from this partial decomposition is now being released.
Array, and methane is a greenhouse gas? That's Polly's way of speaking bilkul sahi.
Even if all the countries try their best to stop greenhouse gas emissions, the temperatures will continue to rise for some years, though much less than at present. So they will have to think of ways of adapting to live under such conditions.
What about governments of many countries getting together to fight this long-term disaster?
I was just coming to that. There is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC.
What does it do?
Its mission is to give a clear scientific opinion on the latest state of affairs with regard to climate change and its likely environmental and social implications. There are 195 IPCC members from all across the world.
Polly, you don't understand what IPCC is all about.
Even I am a bit confused.
The IPCC is a United Nations body that helps governments worldwide to make policies to fight climate change. They do this by providing some very valuable data after carrying out scientific research. Any new policy is not made just by the whims of a few people. It has to have proper scientific research backing. Am I right, Charu Chachi?
Well said, Tara. The IPCC ensures we are aware of climate change through its reports. It indicates where scientists agree on issues like climate change and where additional research is needed. The Paris Treaty, on the other hand, is another body that appeals to countries to follow their policies. The countries that agree to them are legally bound to do so. In December 2015, in the 21st Conference of Parties held in Paris, 195 countries committed to the latest Paris Agreement. The goal was to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius.
But in spite of that, the temperature shot up higher, na?
Yes. Moreover, according to the Paris Agreement, wealthy nations should help the poorer and more vulnerable nations. Mitigating climate change is an expensive process.
How come?
Countries have to switch over to cheap renewable forms of energy, which means they have to install solar panels or wind turbines. Afforestation of degraded lands has to be carried out on a war footing. Buildings have to be constructed in a manner that utilizes the least energy, using materials that do not get heated up. Public transport should be made comfortable and cheap to encourage people to stop using cars. Let us now look at some climate change warriors or heroes who may inspire you, Tara.
Yay! I would love to hear their stories.
Who knows? One day you too may become a climate change hero.
The first to come to my mind is Al Gore. He became famous through his film, The Inconvenient Truth, which won 2 Oscar awards in 2006. This film was followed by another one in 2017, an inconvenient sequel, Truth to Power.
I would like to see those films.
Maybe I can organize an evening of film viewing at my hotel one of these days. The other guests too could view them if they wish.
In 2007, Al Gore and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change were both given the Nobel Peace Prize because they told the world about what could happen if climate changed. The good work that he did led him to be elected as Vice President of the United States, where he was in office for 8 years.
That is so inspiring. What about the other heroes?
There is Greta Thunberg.
Arey haan, I have heard her name, but I always wanted to know more about her.
She was just 15 years old, a year older than you, when she sat outside the Swedish Parliament one day in 2018, holding up a signboard that said, "School Strike for Climate."
That was very brave of her. Did you hear that, Polly?
Greta's courage and forthrightness inspired many other youngsters in other countries to campaign for better governance that would reverse climate change.
क्या बात है?
Soon enough, she was nominated for the first of 3 Nobel Peace Prizes for her work on climate change. In 2019, Greta sailed across the Atlantic on a yacht to go to a UN climate change conference in New York. She wanted to set an example of how one can avoid the use of fossil fuels by traveling in a sailboat rather than by plane.
I really admire her.
In one of her most famous speeches, she said, "You all come to us young people because you need hope. How could you? Your empty words have stolen my dreams and childhood." And recently, in the COP26 summit, the head, Alok Sharma, said that Thunberg's UN speech in 2019 made him feel really uncomfortable because it showed a mirror to his own generation.
This is getting more and more interesting, Charu Chachi. Can you tell me more about such environmental heroes?
Yes, there is Vinisha Umashankar. an Indian environmentalist from Tiruvannamalai in Tamil Nadu, who was nominated as a finalist for the Earth Shot Environmental Prize.
What did she do to become so famous?
She shot to fame at the age of 12 when she saw her mother delivering clothes to an elderly couple for ironing. The couple were using a charcoal-filled cast iron box to iron the clothes in the sweltering heat.
So, what did she do?
Vinisha did a lot of research, going through physics books in the library to find out how solar panels functioned. Finally, she invented her own solar-powered steam ironing cart.
How amazing! Did you hear that, Polly?
Engineers helped her create a functional prototype and patent it. They created Iron Max, a blue painted iron box with solar panels on its roof. It's mounted on a bike, so washermen can ride about town picking up dirty clothes. The cart also contains a coin-operated phone and a charging station, which helps vendors make extra money.
A solar powered iron is a very good idea for my hotel when laundering the guest clothes.
Now that I have told you about the climate action warriors, maybe you would like to hear about how some cities are helping in beating climate change.
Ha, that would be most interesting. Don't you agree, Polly? Charu Chachi, you know so much. There is never a dull moment when you are around.
And we get to learn so many interesting facts.
There is this city of Bogota, which got many new bike lanes during the pandemic to promote cycling. The city built 84 kilometers of emergency cycle lanes in March 2020 to help key personnel get to work. Later, many more cycling lanes were added. In fact, Bogota now has the highest bicycle use in Latin America, and it will continue to improve.
That means they have reduced to such a great deal the burning of fossil fuels.
Milan is another place which will soon become a city forest. It is planning to plant 3 million trees by 2030, a tree to every citizen. In addition, the city is thinking of establishing green corridors that connect existing forests.
They show a true love for the environment. I wish all the cities in India too would plant so many trees. Planting of trees and caring for them is not at all difficult. In fact, it builds up a love for nature, and with so many trees, people are reducing the use of fossil fuels. And surely, the climate can turn much cooler.
Basel is planting wildflowers on all its flat roofs. Just imagine what a glorious sight it must be, seeing wildflowers blooming on all of Basel's flat roofs, old and new. The project has drawn other biodiversity, such as butterflies and uncommon birds, into the city.
That gives me an idea. A school building has a flat roof. I will tell my teachers about this idea, and all the students can take care of the plants.
Now, let us imagine what the world would look like in 2030 if we defeat climate change. I can visualize people using electric trains and electric buses for public transport. Also, most people would be walking or bicycling. Imagine how quieter the roads would be without the cacophonous honking of cars.
I can visualize fewer concrete buildings. Instead, a lot more gardens and parks where old people can relax and children can play. All houses would be having renewable energy.
I can see people eating more of fruits and vegetables. Meat, dairy, and fish won't be the main parts of our diet anymore. There will be less livestock farming, which means more land will be available for growing food for humans to eat.
After this discussion about climate change, Tara, on returning back to her home, took up a project of observing the seasonal changes in 10 different trees around her house. She would note down the changes every once a week. She continued jotting down her observations and taking photographs for a whole year, all through the different seasons. Her friends in school too noted their observations of other trees. The data gathered was collated and used to make into a tree app.
Let's act while there is hope. To climate change we say no, no. Simple acts for the environment. Why wait for the government? Shouldn't we start the movement? Let's tip the balance. Let's cool the planet. Wouldn't it make a happier scene to have a smiling planet green? Isn't it our responsibility? Let's act while there is hope. For climate change, don't leave no scope.